Okay, I'm back. So, as I was saying before, you have these 5 elements, and they all have their own list of correspondences, right? They have their primary characteristic, like wood reaches out from itself, right? And then they have all these things that they correspond to. Wood corresponds to the color green and the flavor of sour and like all of these things. And you use these correspondences and these patterns to identify what the problem is when you have and how you can best treat your client and bring them back into balance when they come in to see you. And this class is not designed to make you into a shiatsu therapist or an acupressure therapist or anyone who's going to be like grasping and applying these concepts. So I will try to be just really clear and brief here. But if you take a look at your Tappan's Handbook, you'll see that it kind of has these tables and correspondences and examples. And the purpose of knowing those examples is so that you can assess and evaluate your client when they come in. So if you have someone who is a businessman who is really into making change, and they really, they're getting frustrated and pent up, and they're getting headaches, and they really like sour food, and they hate sweet things, and like all of these things, and they're having problems. They fall asleep okay, but then they wake up in the middle of the night, So you have all these things that you ask about and you use in your assessment if you are a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine. And we're not going to worry about the nitty-gritty and the details, but I just want you to know why those tables are there. And that's because they all are like little clues that you use in TCM to create your treatment plan. Another thing that you'll want to know is that there is this body clock that will come around, and basically the idea is that as we go through the day and night, the qi in our body flows around through all of our different meridians, and it does so in like a wave. So and so that knowing that clock is another assessment tool. You'll see it on page 597. Is that table of elemental attributes, and the body clock column starts at the lung, which is 3 to 5 a.m. So if you have someone who is always waking up at 3 a.m. And they can't seem to get back to sleep until after 5, then you'd treat their lung meridian, basically, is what's going on there. Alternately, if you wanted to have a bigger effect on a meridian, like kidney, for example, you might choose to make your appointment during the time when that meridian was most active, right? So say you have a client and you've determined that their kidney meridian is the one you want to treat, and so you have them come in between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. because that's when the kidney meridian is the most active with qi. Right? So that's why the body clock is there. It's there as an assessment tool, and also it can help you in your treatment planning depending on how into it you want to get. All right. So the next bit about 5 elements has to do with what we call Sheng and Ko. And it starts in Tappan's Handbook on the bottom of page 579 if you want to do some additional reading. And you'll see something that looks a lot like this picture. It'll have wood, fire, earth, metal, water, with these lines pointing in a circle around the outside and like kind of making a star in the middle. And the important parts that I want you to know are that in the picture, the outside ring The outside ring is what we call the Sheng cycle. And it is the pattern in which the elements support one another. The star on the inside is what we call the Ko cycle. And it is the pattern in which the elements control or inhibit one another. So, there is actually like a pretty decent description of this in your Tappan's Handbook, so I will have you go ahead and flip open that Tappan's Handbook and read it, but I'll give you a quick talk through of it just so you kind of get the gist if you're a more like visual learner here. So basically, if you start with wood, and again, starting with the Sheng cycle, which is the contributing cycle, the creation cycle, or supportive cycle, if whatever, as you will. So wood supports fire. Obviously, fire, eats wood for breakfast, basically, if you're speaking literally. But the desire, it's also saying that the desire to reach out from yourself will create that spark, that spontaneity. It will create joy. It will create upward momentum as well as outward momentum. Fire creates earth. Obviously, when something burns, the leftovers are ash, which goes back into the earth. Within ourselves, having joy, having fulfillment, having these types of qualities and pursuing them can create stability and a firm foundation within our lives for us to support our own self, right? Earth creates metal, and that's a reference in the natural world to how metal is found deep within the earth. But what this is saying is that when we have a solid foundation, when we can nurture others, when we have a sense of like holding our ground, then we're able to find our inner value and our inner value system. We're able to recognize the value of tradition and maintain our integrity in terms of right and wrong, right? Metal creates or engenders water. And the examples they always use are like metal scooping up water in a bucket. But but in old, like the old examples in some of the older texts, is that how water will condense upon metal, like in the morning, like more so like a pop can. If you leave a pop can out, then water condenses around the side of it, right? And what this is saying is that, I guess I have a note here that in your Tappan's Handbook it says traces of metal are found in water, as in metal gives rise to water as strengthens it and supports it by making it richer. So this is a metaphor. This is a metaphor for how traditions and virtue and values, which are metal, if properly understood and applied, can give rise within ourselves to courage and wisdom. Okay? That's what they're getting at there. Metal gives rise to water in that traditions and rules and values and virtues, if we properly integrate them in ourselves, engender and help create wise actions, right? And our own courage and that kind of thing. And they like enrich the deep hidden part of ourselves. I hope that's clear. And then water gives rise to wood. In the natural world, obviously plants need water to live, but it's saying that wisdom and courage will lead to reaching out from yourself and affecting the world around you, right? So that is the supportive circle That is the Shen, or sorry, Shen. Sheng with a G, Sheng, Sheng, the Sheng cycle. So there's that. And the other one is the controlling cycle. And again, you can read your Tappan's Handbook, but basically we've already talked about wood controls earth, in that when you reach out from yourself, it can stifle your ability to stay put. Earth controls water. That earthy stability-ness can, obviously earth can contain water like a lake, right? But that earthy stability-ness can sometimes stop you from rushing forward, like the courageous water rushing forward can stop you from taking that action. Water controls fire. Obviously, water puts out fire, but it's also saying that internal wisdom can stop you from flaring up and being spontaneous. Fire controls metal, as in fire can, like in a forge, fire will meld metal. And that's saying that our spontaneity and our joy will stop us from being too rigid and too seeking of perfection. And then metal controls wood, like an axe cutting down a tree, saying that rules and boundaries and a sense of right and wrong can stop us from exerting ourselves on the outside world too much, right? Okay, so that was a whole big chunk of information, right? For the test, I would like you to remember that the Sheng cycle is the supportive cycle of the 5 elements and is represented by the outside ring. And I would like you to remember that the Ko cycle is the controlling cycle and is represented by the inside star. You are not, oh, here we go. If you note, if you have that diagram in front of you with the outside ring and the star, and you note where the elements are on that diagram and which direction each cycle flows, you will be able to answer the questions on the test that pertain to this topic, okay? So know the basic concepts, the basic characteristics of each element, and maybe remember how that's interpreted within ourselves a little bit, and then know that this is the Sheng cycle, it's the supportive cycle, and it's pictured as the ring on the outside, and that this is the Ko cycle, it goes in this direction, and it is the controlling cycle, and it's pictured as the star on the inside. If you have that there in front of you, you will be able to answer the questions on the test. So again, don't dive off the deep end too much in terms of all of the different ways that you can pick things apart and pick yourself apart, and all the different correspondences and characteristics of the 5 elements. For this class, just stick to the basics. Don't let yourself get confused. There are many bits of them that can be similar to each other. Like, what's the difference between earth element integrity and metal element right and wrong, and water element wisdom, and don't drown in details. Stick to the handout and do your reading in Tappan's Handbook. This is one area in Tappan's Handbook where it actually can be helpful. They've got some good tables and things in there. And then I am going to do one more video lecture that is kind of like, let's bring it all together as sort of like a review / prep for the test. The test will be in this unit, right? So this week we are being tested on all the things we've already learned. before we move on. So I'm going to go do that now, and you have a wonderful rest of your day.